The call came at 3:47 p.m. on a Thursday. I remember the exact time because I was staring at the clock on my dashboard, stuck in traffic on Route 22, wondering if I'd make it to the dry cleaners before they closed. My phone lit up with a number I didn't recognize, and normally I wouldn't have answered. Telemarketers, scams, someone trying to sell me an extended warranty on a car I didn't own. But something made me swipe to accept. "Is this Mrs. Catherine Brennan?" The voice was female, young, professional, but strained. "Yes, this is she, Mrs. Brennan. This is Jennifer calling from Steady Luke's hospital. Your son, Michael, has been brought to our emergency department. There's been an accident." The world tilted. Everything after that is a blur of motion and terror. I don't remember pulling over. I don't remember turning the car around or driving the 12 miles to the hospital. I must have run red lights. I must have been screaming, but I can't recall making a sound. All I remember is the white-hot panic spreading through my chest like a wildfire. The way my hands shook so badly I could barely grip the steering wheel. And the single thought looping endlessly in my mind, "Please, God, not my son. Please, not my son." Michael was 19. He just started his sophomore year at the community college 15 minutes from our house. He still lived at home not because he had to, but because he wanted to. He liked our old farmhouse with the creaky floors and the kitchen that always smelled like coffee. He liked being close. We were close. Closer than most mothers and sons, I think. After his father died when Michael was 12, it had just been the two of us, navigating grief and life and everything in between. I pulled into the hospital parking lot going too fast, tires squealing. I left the car crooked across two spaces, keys still in the ignition, door hanging open. I ran. The automatic doors to the air seemed to move in slow motion. Inside, the fluorescent lights were too bright, the air sharp with disinfectant and fear. A woman at the desk looked up as I stumbled toward her. "My son," I gasped. "Michael Brennan. They called me. Where is he?" She typed something into her computer with maddening slowness. "Room 4. Through those doors. Turn left." I was already moving. The hallway was a tunnel of curtained beds and medical equipment. I heard moaning from behind one curtain, a child crying behind another. My heart was hammering so hard I thought it might crack my ribs. "Room 4. Room 4. There." I reached for the curtain, but before I could pull it back, a hand caught my wrist. I spun around. A doctor stood there, a man in his 50s with silver hair and tired eyes. His scrubs had small flecks of blood on them. My blood ran cold. "Mrs. Brennan?" "Yes, my son. He's stable," the doctor said quickly, and I nearly collapsed with relief. "But I need to talk to you before you go in. I need to see him." "You will." But first he glanced toward the curtain, then back at me. His expression was grave. "Mrs. Brennan, your son has sustained serious injuries. Blunt force trauma to the chest and abdomen. Fractured ribs, collapsed lung, internal bleeding. We've stabilized him, but he's going to need surgery." The words swirled around me, incomprehensible. "Surgery, bleeding, collapsed lung. What happened?" I whispered. "He was hit by a car. A delivery truck, actually. Witnesses say he was crossing the street near campus and the truck ran a red light. The driver didn't stop, hit and run. My baby had been hit by a truck and left in the street like roadside trash." Rage and terror warred inside me. But the terror won. "Can I see him? Please." The doctor's hand was still on my wrist, gentle but firm. "You can." "But Catherine," he used my first name, and that scared me more than anything. "You need to be strong when you walk in there. Your son is conscious and alert. He's in pain, but he's talking. He's asking for you. Then let me go to him. Listen to me." The doctor leaned in closer, his voice dropping to barely a whisper. "Don't let him see you fall apart. Don't let him see you scared. He needs you to be steady right now. Do you understand?" I nodded, though I wasn't sure I did. "Whatever you're feeling, terror, anger, grief, you leave it out here. You go in there, you smile at your boy, and you tell him he's going to be okay. Can you do that?" I looked at the curtain. Behind it was my son, my Michael, broken and bleeding and asking for his mother. I swallowed the sob climbing up my throat. "Yes," I said, "I can do that. The doctor released my wrist and stepped back. I pulled the curtain aside and walked in. Michael lay on a gurney, his face pale as paper except for the ugly purple bruise blooming across his left cheekbone. An oxygen mask covered his nose and mouth. 4 lines snaked from his arms. Monitors beeped steadily beside him, but his eyes, those warm brown eyes he'd inherited from his father, were open and locked on me the moment I entered. "Mom," he said, his voice muffled by the mask. I forced myself to smile, forced my legs to carry me to his side, forced my hand to be steady as I reached out and brushed the hair back from his forehead. "Hey, kiddo," I said softly. "You scared me. Sorry." His lips twitched in what might have been an attempt at a smile. "Didn't mean to." "I know you didn't." I pulled up a stool and sat down, keeping my hand on his forehead, stroking gently. His skin was cool and clammy. "How are you feeling?" "Like I got hit by a truck." Despite everything, I laughed. It came out shaky, but it was genuine. "That's because you did. You knucklehead." "Yeah." His eyes drifted closed for a moment, then opened again. "Mom, I can't feel my legs." The world stopped. "What?" "My legs. I can't feel them." I looked down at the blanket covering him from the waist down. Then I looked up at the monitors, the 4 bags, the controlled chaos of tubes and wires keeping my son alive. "It's probably just the pain medication," I said, keeping my voice calm even as panic screamed through my skull. "The doctor said they gave you something strong." "Maybe." But he didn't sound convinced. A nurse came in then, a kind-faced woman with graying hair pulled back in a bun. She checked Michael's vitals, adjusted something on one of the monitors, and gave me a reassuring nod before slipping back out. "They're taking good care of you," I said. "I know." Michael's hand found mine on the blanket. His fingers were cold. "Mom, I'm scared." The doctor's words echoed in my head. "Don't let him see you scared." I squeezed his hand. "You're going to be okay," I said firmly. "The doctors here are excellent. They're going to fix you up, and you're going to be just fine. Promise?" God, he sounded so young. Not 19. Not a college student with a part-time job and a girlfriend and dreams of becoming a mechanical engineer. He sounded like the little boy who used to crawl into my bed after a nightmare, seeking comfort in the dark. "I promise." I lied. He seemed to relax a fraction. "Will you stay with me?" "Wild horses couldn't drag me away." He smiled then, a real one, and closed his eyes. Within minutes, his breathing had evened out into the rhythm of sleep. I sat there holding his hand, listening to the beep of the monitors, and finally allowed myself to fall apart. The tears came silently. I bent forward over our joined hands and wept into my lap, my whole body shaking with the force of it. But I made no sound. Even in my breakdown, I was conscious of not waking him, not letting him see. "I can't feel my legs." Those words played on repeat in my mind. I knew what they might mean. I'd watched enough medical dramas, read enough news stories. Spinal injury, paralysis, a life forever changed. But I couldn't think about that. Not yet. Right now. He just needed to survive. The surgery took 6 hours. They let me wait in a private room off the main surgical waiting area, a small kindness from the hospital staff who could see I was barely holding it together. I called my sister Anne, who lived 2 states away. She said she'd catch the first flight out in the morning. I called Michael's girlfriend, Emma, who arrived within the hour, mascara streaked and trembling. We sat together in silence mostly, hands clasped, waiting. The surgeon who finally came to talk to us was a different doctor, a woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense manner. "The surgery went well," she said, and I could breathe again. "We repaired the internal bleeding and re-inflated his lung. His ribs will heal on their own. He's stable and in recovery now." "Can I see him?" "Soon. He'll be moved to the ICU within the hour." She paused, and I saw something flicker across her face. Hesitation. "Mrs. Brennan, during the surgery we did a full assessment of his injuries. The trauma to his lower back was significant. There's swelling around his spinal cord." Emma's hand tightened on mine. "What does that mean?" I asked, though I already knew. It means we need to wait for the swelling to go down before we can fully assess the extent of any spinal damage. It could be temporary. The paralysis he's experiencing in his lower extremities might resolve as the swelling decreases. Might? I can't make any promises at this stage. We'll know more in the next 48 to 72 hours. She left us with that uncertainty, that terrible limbo between hope and devastation. Michael spent 3 days in the ICU before being moved to a regular room. The swelling went down. The paralysis didn't. The neurologist was kind but direct. The damage to Michael's spinal cord was permanent. He would never walk again. I was with him when they told him. I watched my son's face as he processed the words. Watched the disbelief, the denial, the slow horrifying acceptance settle over him like a shroud. And I sat beside his bed and held his hand and told him it would be okay. We would figure it out. We would get through this together. But that night, after visiting hours ended and I drove home alone to our empty farmhouse, I sat in my car in the driveway and screamed. I screamed until my throat was raw and my voice was gone. I screamed at God, at the universe, at the faceless truck driver who had destroyed my son's life and driven away without looking back. And then I went inside, washed my face, and went to bed. Because in the morning I would go back to the hospital and I would smile at my son and I would be strong. Because that's what mothers do. The weeks that followed were a blur of rehabilitation appointments, insurance paperwork, and modifications to our home. We installed ramps, widened doorways, converted the downstairs den into a bedroom for Michael because he couldn't manage the stairs. I learned about wheelchair models and pressure sores and adaptive equipment. I learned a whole new vocabulary of medical terms I'd never wanted to know. Michael was quiet through most of it. He did his physical therapy without complaint. He learned to transfer from bed to wheelchair and back again. He practiced navigating our newly renovated house with a determined expression that broke my heart a little more each day. But he didn't smile anymore. He didn't joke. The light that had always shone in his eyes, that spark of joy and mischief and life, had gone out. Emma tried. She came by every day at first, bringing homework from his classes, news from campus, cheerful chatter about their friends. But Michael barely responded. After a few weeks, her visits grew less frequent. After 2 months, they stopped altogether. He didn't seem to notice. One evening in late November, about 3 months after the accident, I found him in his room staring out the window at the backyard. The trees were bare, the grass brown and dead. It was the kind of gray, colorless evening that makes the whole world look like a faded photograph. "Hey," I said softly from the doorway. "Dinner's ready. I'm not hungry." "Michael," I said, "I'm not hungry." His voice was flat, emotionless. I stepped into the room and sat down on the edge of his bed. "You need to eat something. You barely touched your lunch." "What does it matter?" "It matters because I love you and I want you to be healthy." He finally turned to look at me, and the expression on his face nearly broke me. "Healthy," he repeated bitterly. "Right, because I'm the picture of health." "Michael, I'm never going to walk again, Mom. I'm never going to play basketball or go hiking or dance at my wedding. I'm never going to be normal. So what's the point of eating or physical therapy or any of it? What's the point?" I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell him he was wrong, that his life could still be full and meaningful, that this wasn't the end. But looking at him, at my broken, despairing son, I didn't have the words. So instead, I did the only thing I could think of. I stood up, walked to his wheelchair, and knelt down in front of him so we were eye to eye. "The point," I said quietly, "is that you're my son and I need you. The point is that you're only 19 years old and you have your whole life ahead of you, different though it may be. The point is that some drunk driver or careless truck driver or cruel twist of fate doesn't get to decide that your life is over. You decide that. You." Tears were streaming down his face now. "I don't know how to do this," he whispered. "I don't know how to be this person." "Neither do I admitted. "But we'll figure it out together, just like we always have." He leaned forward and I wrapped my arms around him, holding him while he sobbed into my shoulder. And I cried too, because I didn't know how to fix this. I didn't know how to take away his pain. I was his mother and I was supposed to be able to make everything okay, But this was so far beyond my ability to fix that I felt helpless and useless and terrified. But I held him anyway. Because even when you can't fix something, you can still be there. The turning point came in January. Michael had a physical therapy appointment at the rehab center, and I drove him there like I did twice a week. We had our routine down by then, me helping him transfer into the car, loading his wheelchair into the trunk, unloading it again at the center, helping him transfer back into the chair. All of it done in near silence. But that day, when we entered the rehab gym, there was someone new there. His name was Marcus, and he was in his mid-30s, with dark skin, bright eyes, and arms that looked like they could lift a car. He was also in a wheelchair, a sleek, expensive-looking model that he maneuvered with ease and grace. "You must be Michael," Marcus said, wheeling over with an extended hand. "I'm Marcus. I'll be working with you today." Michael shook his hand reluctantly. "Where's Karen?" "Karen's on vacation. You're stuck with me for the next 2 weeks." He grinned. Try not to look so disappointed. Despite himself, Michael's lips twitched. I left them to their session and went to sit in the waiting room, but through the glass wall I could see them working together. Marcus pushed Michael harder than Karen ever had, demanding more reps, more effort, more focus. But he also joked around, teased him, treated him like a person rather than a patient, and slowly, grudgingly, Michael started to respond. When the session ended, Michael wheeled himself out to the waiting room, and I was startled to see something that had been absent for months, the faint ghost of a smile. "So," I said, "how was it?" "Hard." He paused. "But good." Over the next 2 weeks, I watched my son come back to life. Marcus, it turned out, had been paralyzed in a motorcycle accident when he was 22. He'd spent years in the darkness that Michael was lost in now, but he'd found his way out. He'd gone back to school, become a physical therapist, gotten married, had kids. He lived a full life different from the one he'd planned, but full nonetheless, and he didn't sugarcoat anything. He told Michael that yes, it would be hard. Yes, there would be days when he wanted to give up. Yes, people would stare and ask intrusive questions and make him feel like less than human sometimes. "But here's the thing," Marcus said one day, when I happened to be within earshot. "You get to decide who you are. Not the accident. Not the wheelchair. You can let this destroy you, or you can let it reshape you into something stronger. Your choice." When Karen came back from vacation, Michael asked if Marcus could stay on as his therapist. Karen agreed without hesitation, and slowly, my son began to heal. By spring, Michael had re-enrolled in classes, just 2 to start, both online. He'd reconnected with a few friends from campus. He'd even started going to a support group for young adults with spinal cord injuries. He still had bad days. Days when the weight of his new reality pressed down so hard he couldn't get out of bed. Days when he raged against the unfairness of it all. But the bad days became fewer, and the good days began to outnumber them. One Saturday morning in April, I woke to the sound of music playing downstairs. I pulled on my robe and patted down to find Michael in the kitchen, making breakfast. He'd made scrambled eggs, toast, and coffee, all from his wheelchair, using the modifications we'd installed. "Morning," he said when he saw me. "I figured you deserved a day off from cooking." I stared at him, at the food, at the smile on his face, and burst into tears. "Mom." He wheeled closer, concerned. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong." I wiped at my eyes with the sleeve of my robe. "Everything's. I'm just proud of you." So proud. His cheeks flushed slightly, but he was grinning. "It's just eggs." "Mom, it's not just eggs." We ate breakfast together at the kitchen table, and for the first time in months, it felt like we might actually be okay. It was a Tuesday in May when the doorbell rang. I was in the middle of folding laundry, and Michael was at physical therapy, so I answered it myself. On the porch stood a police officer, a young woman with kind eyes and a serious expression. "Mrs. Brennan?" My heart jumped into my throat. "Yes?" "I'm Officer Diane Chen. I'm here about your son's case." "May I come in?" I led her to the living room, my mind racing. They'd never found the truck driver. The investigation had gone cold within weeks. I'd made peace with the fact that whoever had hit my son and left him to die in the street would never face justice. "We found him," Officer Chen said as soon as we sat down. "The driver. His name is Robert Caldwell." I couldn't breathe. "He came forward last week," she continued. "Turned himself in. Said he couldn't live with the guilt anymore." "He waited 8 months," I said, my voice shaking with sudden rage. 8 months while my son learned to live without his legs. And he was just, what? Waiting to see if the guilt would pass? He says he panicked, that he was driving without insurance and had a suspended license from a prior DUI. He was afraid of going to prison. He should be afraid. He should. I stopped myself, pressing my hands to my face. Officer Chen waited patiently. "What happens now?" I asked finally. "He's been charged with hit and run causing serious injury, driving without a license, and leaving the scene of an accident. He'll go to trial. We'll need Michael to testify. If he's willing, will he go to prison? That's up to the judge and jury. But given the circumstances and his prior DUI, yes, he'll likely serve time." After she left, I sat alone in the living room for a long time. I thought about Robert Caldwell, this stranger who had irrevocably changed our lives. I thought about justice and punishment and whether anything could ever make this right. When Michael came home an hour later, I told him. He was quiet for a long moment. "Do you want him to go to prison?" he asked finally. I trailed off, realizing I didn't know what I wanted. I want him to understand what he did. I want him to carry the weight of it. But mostly I just want you to be okay. "I'm okay," Michael said. And the remarkable thing was, he meant it. I mean, I'm not okay with what happened. I'll never be okay with that. But I'm okay with who I am now. And sending him to prison won't give me my legs back. So what do you want to do? He thought about it. "I'll testify. He should face consequences. But I don't want to let him take up any more space in my head than he already has. I want to move forward." I looked at my son, at this young man who had been through hell and come out the other side with grace and wisdom that humbled me, and felt my heart swell with love. "When did you get so wise?" I asked softly. He grinned. "I learned from the best." The trial took place that fall. Robert Caldwell was a slight man in his 40s with thinning hair and hollow eyes. He looked diminished sitting in the defendant's chair, like he'd been carrying a boulder for so long that it had compressed him into something smaller than he'd once been. Michael testified with calm dignity, explaining what he remembered of the accident, describing his injuries, outlining how his life had changed. He spoke without anger or bitterness, just facts. When it was over, Caldwell was sentenced to 4 years in prison outside the courthouse afterward. Michael and I stood on the steps in the autumn sunshine. "How do you feel?" I asked. "Relieved," he said. "Like I can finally close that chapter." "Me too." We started toward the car, but a voice stopped us. "Michael." We turned. Robert Caldwell's lawyer stood there, a woman in her 50s with steel gray hair. "My client wanted me to give you this," she said, extending an envelope. Michael took it hesitantly. "What is it?" "A letter. He wanted to apologize in person, but his attorney advised against contact. So he wrote this instead. You don't have to read it if you don't want to." She walked away, leaving us standing there with the envelope in the car. Michael opened it. I tried not to watch as he read, but I couldn't help seeing his expression soften, then harden, then soften again. "What does it say?" I asked when he'd finished. He folded the letter carefully and put it back in the envelope. "He says he's sorry, that he thinks about what he did every day, that he knows nothing he says can change anything. But he wanted me to know that he's broken by it, by what he did to me." "Do you believe him?" "Yeah," Michael said quietly. "I do." "Does it change anything?" He was quiet for a moment. "No," he said finally. "But it helps somehow, knowing that he's human, that he's suffering too. It makes it easier to let go." It's been 4 years now since the accident. Michael graduated from community college last spring with honors. He's enrolled at the State University in the fall to study mechanical engineering with a focus on adaptive technologies. He wants to design better wheelchairs, better prosthetics, better equipment for people like him. He has a new girlfriend, Sarah, who he met at the support group. She has MS and uses a cane on bad days. They understand each other in ways that able-bodied partners never could. He still lives at home, but he's looking at accessible apartments near campus. He's ready to be independent, ready to start the next chapter of his life. And me? I'm learning to let go. Learning that my job isn't to protect him from every hurt or fix every problem. My job is just to love him, to be there, to believe in him even when he doesn't believe in himself. Last week, we were in the kitchen together, me making dinner, him sitting at the table working on a design project for class. The evening sun slanted through the window, painting everything gold. "Hey, Mom," he said, looking up from his laptop. "Yeah? Remember when I was in the hospital, right after the accident, and you told me I'd be okay?" "I remember. You were right." I set down the knife I'd been using to chop vegetables and looked at him. "I didn't feel right at the time," I admitted. "I felt like a liar." "I know. But you kept saying it anyway. You kept believing it even when I couldn't. And that made all the difference." I crossed to him and kissed the top of his head, like I used to when he was small. "I love you," I said. "More than you'll ever know. I love you too, Mom." And standing there in our kitchen, in the home we'd rebuilt together, with my son whole in all the ways that mattered, I finally understood what that doctor had been trying to tell me in the hospital all those years ago. Don't let him see you scared, not because fear isn't valid, not because terror and grief aren't real and justified, but because sometimes the most powerful thing you can give someone you love is the belief that they'll survive this, that they'll be okay, that they're strong enough to handle whatever comes, even when you're not sure you believe it yourself. Even when your heart is breaking, even when the world is falling apart, you hold steady, you stay strong, not because you're not afraid, but because your fear matters less than their need for your faith in them. That's what it means to love someone. To be their anchor when the storm hits. To be the solid ground when everything else is shifting. And in the end, they become your anchor too. They show you that humans are more resilient than we ever give ourselves credit for. That life can be good and full and meaningful even when it's nothing like we planned. That broken things can heal into something beautiful. That we're stronger together than we could ever be alone. I ran into that terrified I was going to lose my son, but I didn't lose him. He's right here, different than he was. Yes, but still here, still mine, still Michael. And that's more than enough. That's everything.